Perfect. All right. So hello, everyone. I'm Valerie Rodriguez. I'm 19 years old, and I am from Orlando, Florida. So just a little bit about me. I've been showing poultry since 2020. I joined FFA when I began high school in 9th grade, and that's kind of, through showing poultry is where I found my spot in this world. I fell in love with it. It was my foot into the door, and now I am where I'm at. Besides showing through FFA at like my county fair, I've showed at the state fair, and I've showed on the national level. I've traveled to Alabama, Georgia, Ohio, just a whole bunch of different states because I'm a crazy chicken lady. I truly am. That's just how I am, and there's no shame in that. I love chicken nerds. So on the showmanship side, I've competed since I began, and so I apologize. I have pet birds, so they're like hooting in the background, but I have been doing showmanship since the beginning because at our county fair, we don't have an option. So I've attended clinics and workshops from multiple different people because I was like, I want to get to know my showmanship skills very, very well. So I've done different types of showmanship because there's a variety of ways a judge can judge you. So I have compiled a list of questions that I've been asked before, ways to be presented. And then I've also gone through the Google Forms and I have pulled up all of your guys' questions. So that, can you put in her cage, please? So that I can go ahead and hit everything and make sure everybody leaves here happy and informed. So I'm just going to begin with the basics. Start from ground zero. When it comes to showmanship, there's multiple things that factor into the contest and into the grading and judging. One of the more important things is, to make sure that you know your bird very well. Today I have my little guest judge. This is Kokowa. She was the first chicken that I ever got. So she's a little old, but I like to use her for my showmanship bird because she's calm. So I think the most important thing when it comes to showmanship is making sure you know your bird. You want to pick a bird that you can handle, a bird that is appropriate for your size. So if you are a peewee or a junior, a younger kid, you want to work with a bantam chicken rather than a standard chicken because it shows better. It shows that the kid knows what they're doing and they can properly and safely handle a bird. And so in some shows, not all, you do have the choice to have a separate bird for showmanship. So your showmanship bird doesn't always have to be a show quality bird. It can just be sometimes just like a backyard pet or a bird you've really bonded with. You just need to know that bird really well. When you walk into the ring, I think you always need to have a good introduction. Be able to present yourself well. Know how to handle your bird well so that off the bat, you're giving the judge a good impression. So my kind of draft of what I always like to say when I walk into the ring is I always start with, hi, my name is Valerie Rodriguez. I am from blank blank. So I'll either say if I'm showing under FFA or 4-H, I'll say my chapter. If I'm showing just at like a YEPA show or an APA show, I'll say I'm from Orlando, Florida. Just to give the judge a really good, straight to the point introduction so that they know where you are and a little bit about you. And then I always go, hi, my name is Valerie Rodriguez. I'm from Orlando, Florida. And here with me today for showmanship, I have then you say information about your bird. So like I said, know your bird very well. There are two types, well, actually, for chickens, there are two types of birds. There are standard and then there are bantam. And then for waterfowl like geese and ducks, there's just lightweight, medium weight, and heavyweight. So make sure you know all the details from the type of bird to the class, to the variety, to the breed, and even give your bird a name. I always like to add a touch of that to my introduction because it gives personality. It lets the judge know that you're not super serious, super scared, and you're just, there to have fun and you know what you're talking about. So my introduction always goes, hi, my name is Valerie Rodriguez. I'm from Orlando, Florida, and here with me today for showmanship is my large fowl silver phoenix hen. Her name is Kokowa. That is always how my introduction goes. So I'm going to break up that introduction. Like I said, the type is always the thing you want to begin with. Large fowl, bantam, or just geese, duck, waterfowl, turkey. That's also an option. So those are the types of birds that they are. And that one's really simple. It breaks up pretty easily, mainly just large fowl, bantam, or standard and bantam. The next thing is to know the class. So depending on your animal, if you have a bantam bird, there are 7 classes of bantams, starting with there's single comb clean-legged, all other comb clean-legged, rose comb clean-legged, feather-legged, modern game, old English game. And then this is like a trick question. Some judges count it, some judges don't. But bantam duck is considered a bantam class in the American Bantam Association standard. So that one's always a good one to just mention, just in case, because you never know. It could count as a bonus point, but it'll never count against you. So you just want to spew as much knowledge as you possibly can to the judge. Now, in large fowl birds, there are 6 classes. There's American, Asiatic, all of their standard breeds, Mediterranean, Continental, and English. Now, those 6 classes are all of your larger sized birds. So just make sure you know and you study up on what class your breed falls into. If you're showing geese or ducks, then the classes are for ducks, the classes are heavyweight, medium weight, lightweight, and then once again, bantam duck. And for geese, it's heavyweight, medium weight, lightweight. I'm not too knowledgeable on turkeys, so I won't tread into those waters because I've never showed a turkey, but I have showed waterfowl before. Now, the next thing from your introduction is to know the breed. So this one is just, if you're going to know one thing out of your whole little introduction to yourself, it is know the breed. So if you have a standard of perfection book, you could always go through and look at your breed. Or, from your breeder, just make sure you remember the breed. Make sure your bird is purebred. If your bird is not purebred and you're allowed to use it in showmanship, then say, this is a bird from a backyard flock. It is a prairie bluebell, Easter egger, a cross between this and this. Just make sure you have something in there so that it shows that you know at least something about your bird. Then there's varieties. When showing your bird in showmanship, you need to make sure you know the variety as well. And that is, each breed has a certain number of accepted varieties. So, for example, my breed, Phoenix, they have in large fowl, they have 3 accepted varieties. So there's black-breasted red, there's gold, and then there's silver, which is what my Kokoa here is. In bantam, there's 6 or 7 accepted varieties. There's silver, silver duckwing, golden, golden duckwing, white, and I think it's light brown red. I don't mingle too much with bantams, but I could tell you perfectly large fowl. So that's how your introduction should go. Your name, your city or club, organization, whatever it is, and then introduce your bird, type, class, breed, variety, gender. I run on gender. So hens are 1 year and older. Pullets are under a year old. Roosters or cockerels are under a year old, males under a year old, and then cockbirds are males over a year old. So those are 4 very important keywords, vocabulary words to remember when you're doing showmanship. So hen and pullet are females, cock and cockerel are males. Now, typically the very first question that will be on a showmanship judge's scorecard is going to be something on the lines of, tell me the name of your bird. Not the name of your bird. Tell me what bird you have with you. And they'll ask you like, oh, what class is your bird in or what breed your bird is. And typically in your introduction, if you introduce your bird, then you automatically get points for that. So you don't necessarily skip a question, but they're like, okay, she knows what she's talking about. He knows what he's talking about. So you'll get marked for that. So not only does the good introduction give you like a good basis, a good first impression, but it knocks the question out of there. So you'll be out of the show ring in no time if you're nervous. Now, typically how I'm going to do it, how I've mainly competed in showmanship is just a classic showmanship where it is just you and the judge. So typically judges will have a table with a cage on it, and they'll ask you, after you do your introduction, they'll ask you to put your bird in the cage and pose the bird. Now, personally, my birds, they will pose, but they're not the best at posing. So I wouldn't put so much stress on if your bird won't pose, because if it is the calmest bird you have, it is the bird you trust, the bird you can work with really well, knowing they won't get flighty in the middle of showmanship, then just calm down. It's okay. It won't affect you that much when it comes to scoring. So to handle a bird, you need to make sure you're handling your chickens properly, because judges do pay attention to this, because showmanship is a combination of your knowledge and how well you handle a bird. So when you're holding your bird, you want to make sure to always have all of their body supported. So what I like to do is I put 2 fingers, slide them in between the legs, right here. I know. It doesn't hurt them. It doesn't hurt them. You're gaining control over your bird. So they might fight a little, but don't let them go, because you need to make sure that they calm down and they get used to it. This is why you got to practice beforehand as well. And you kind of just slide your fingers. So I'll put 2 fingers in the middle. I'll have 1 finger over one leg, 1 finger over the other, and then put their bird to my body, and then your hand over their wing. So this is how you should always carry your bird. You walk in holding your bird like this, so that you can easily present the bird. If you need to, you show the wing. You can easily pass off the bird, all that stuff. So when you walk up, make sure you're holding your bird properly. When a judge asks you to put a bird in the cage or hand them a bird or anything of the sorts, you want to make sure to always go head first. This is the most important thing. Head first, head first, head first. It is for your safety. It is for the safety of the bird. It is for the safety of the person you are handing the bird to. Head first. So to easily pass a bird, you hold them to your body. You grab their wing here and you roll. You roll the bird along your chest and you hold them with both hands, and you either put them in the cage, hand them to the judge, whatever it may be. Always head first. This is the one thing that I have learned and has been emphasized in any showmanship clinic, workshop, practice event, anything that I have attended. They have always told me head first, head first, head first. So you've done your introduction. You've answered the first question, which is typically the tell me about your bird, and you're putting the bird in the cage. When you put the bird in the cage, you go head first and you turn to pose the bird. If the judge is standing to your left, make sure the bird is faced to the left. If you're facing the right and the judge is to the right, make sure the bird is facing to the right. You always want your bird to be facing the judge whenever you are placing it in a showmanship cage. And once you place the bird inside, you set it down, fluff it up, pose it, and close the door. Make sure you close your showmanship cage door, because typically they'll spend the rest of the showmanship questions inside that cage. So you don't want your bird escaping, and you want your judge to know that you care about the safety of your bird. Now, depending on the age group that you're in, the questions will be from all over. Okay, so I've been showing since I was 14. So I've always been in the senior category, but I have judged a few junior categories. So I know about the extent of what each level, how difficult the questions are. We'll start out with like some junior questions that I got, because I do know we have of all ages, and I think the youngest I saw was 5 years old. So for juniors, which is typically ages about 5 to 8 years old, they'll be asked questions, tell me a little bit about your bird. And, the breed, typically it'll ask, regardless of age, the type, class, breed, variety. Then for juniors, I've seen questions like, name me 3 types of combs. This is a question, if it's in the juniors, it could pop up in intermediate, it could pop up in senior, it could pop up in vintage. So the types of combs. This bird, she's a large fowl phoenix. She has a single comb. You can see right here, it's all one comb. In total, there are 9 types of combs. I haven't done, I apologize if I do like take a second to think. I have not done showmanship in a fat minute. I haven't competed personally, but I have judged. So there are 9 types of combs. There are single comb. There is buttercup comb, which is like, it looks like a buttercup. It cups. Let me see if I can share my screen so that I can pull up the graph. Let me see. Okay. I guess I cannot. But there is single comb, buttercup, pea comb, rose comb, bee comb, strawberry comb, cushion, walnut, and chrysanthemum comb. These are the 9 types of combs, which the minimum you'll be asked for is 1. The maximum typically I've been asked out of tiebreakers is 3 or 4. When I get into tiebreakers, that's what I'm asked. Name as many combs as you possibly can. So I know it's a lot. It's a lot of types of combs. There's 9 combs. You have to memorize the breed, variety, class, type. It's a lot of things to memorize. But just to be, to get into the ring and show that you're knowledgeable, I'd say memorize a minimum of just 3 comb types. And you'll be able to get through showmanship with flying colors. For juniors, I've also been asked, or I have asked for juniors to, let me think. So there's the comb types. They'll ask to give just, juniors is really more about just fun. They'll give general information about your bird, like, oh, what's the bird's name? For juniors, they'll ask, what do you feed your bird? This is another thing that is asked in all age groups. What do you feed your bird? So for juniors, and probably intermediates too, 5 to 8, 8 to about 10, 11, junior intermediates, the answer to that question would just be to make sure you know the brand of feed that you're giving your bird. So junior intermediate kids could just answer, oh, I feed Nutrina Nature-Wise, chicken feed, or I feed Purina layer feed. Whatever it is that you feed, always make sure that you know. Now, when you move on to the senior category, you want to be as specific as possible when talking about the feed types. So seniors want to know the protein percentage, the brand, and what type of feed it is. So I always feed Nutrina Nature-Wise, 18% protein, all flock feed. A very simple, straightforward answer. For the older categories, that is how you'd want to answer. For the younger categories, it's just a simple Nutrina Nature-Wise feed, Purina feed, do more feed, more simple, more basic. Next thing that I've been asked on, or that I've seen asked in junior that has also popped up in senior, has been to name defects, or not necessarily defects, but things on your bird that are wrong. I had this question in junior showmanship once, and it was a competitive class of juniors. So don't expect this question if you're on the younger side too much, because it is a more difficult question. But typically for the younger kids, they'll just ask to point out what is wrong in the bird. And juniors, you could answer, I've heard them answer the comb is too big, or they're the wrong color, simple things like that. But when it comes to seniors, it's more of a defects that you can point out on your bird and on your breed. But I'll get more into that later, because that is a huge category, and that's more towards the senior side, but I have seen it pop up a few times in junior. Another good junior question for the younger kids to know is to be able to point out the different parts of your bird. So my bird ran away to go get food, so I'll go grab her real quick. But you want to know and be able to point out different parts on your bird. And there's really simple and easy ones to remember. And I have been asked this question actually as a tiebreaker in the senior category rather than a regular question. So to start off, there is the comb, which is this part up here, the comb. Then there's the eyes. You have the wattles, which are these little ones that hang from their face. And then there's the earlobes right here, the white lobes on my breed's face. Those are 1, 2, 3, 4, and the beak, 5. Those are 5 easy parts of the body that a junior can point to. Some other easy parts of the body, because 5 is like the average question is name 5 body parts, point to 5 body parts, is about how much they ask for the juniors. The other parts, you know, they can say there's the wings, the legs, the shanks, they count it as all, the toes, the tail. It breaks down really simply for juniors. Now, for seniors, you want to be able to point out just as much as you possibly can on your bird. And you can go into specifics. You can keep it basic. Like you can say, you know, the hawks, the shanks, the saddles, the hackle feathers, the tail coverts, the wing coverts. You know, go into a lot of detail, if you're competing in the senior category with that question, which, like I said, typically that is going to be a tiebreaker question for the older kids. But for the younger kids, you'll see that pop up on Showmanship a lot because it's easy for the kids to remember, to hold their bird and be able to point out to you, this is my bird's comb, this is my bird's eyes, this is my bird's earlobes, this is my bird's wattles, and this is my bird's beak. That's 5 pretty easy ones for my younger kids to remember. As for the junior side, that's about the extent of the questions that I have honestly judged for. The comb types, a little bit about the breed, to point to the body parts, tell me the color of your bird, tell me what's wrong with your bird. That's about as much as I've seen for juniors and intermediates. But when it gets into seniors, which is a few of the information I'm about to give out, is when it gets more difficult. For the seniors, I don't know if it's my favorite thing or if it's just the easiest thing I remembered, but I always love to know about different diseases that birds can get. And maybe it's just my luck, but every single showmanship competition that I have competed in has been asked about diseases. Now, there are about like 3 diseases that is typically the ones being asked for. So they ask you like about Merrick's disease. So that is when your bird's legs stop working due to infection in them, a bacterial infection, which Merrick's is something you can vaccinate for. And so when you're being asked about diseases, I don't want to scare anyone, but when they ask you like, oh, can you tell me about this disease? Typically they're asking you what the symptoms are and can you vaccinate or can you not vaccinate for it? So Merrick's, you can vaccinate for it. They'll also ask, I've been asked about coccidiosis, which is intestinal, and it's when they poop blood. And how do you treat it? Well, a symptom that is really easy to notice is that they're pooping blood. And how do you treat it? You treat it by giving them Corid and making sure you monitor them. Another thing that I've been asked when it comes to diseases and parasites is to name different internal versus external diseases or parasites. So the external ones are the ones that you can see on the outside of the chicken's body. And these are typically going to be your mites, your lice, ticks, fleas, all that stuff. And my go-to is, honestly, I could name you 3 external and 3 internal, and my 3 external are mites, fleas, lice. I'll get into specifics, but if you want to search up specifics, there's like the red-footed mites or lice, and then, fleas. There's ones that poultry get, but I've competed various times. I'm very competitive, and I have never been asked to go into specifics, which is something that I am kind of glad about because that is where I would get eliminated. For internal diseases or internal parasites, you say roundworms. Roundworms is one of the main ones, and then there's like cocci is also an internal parasite. It's many different types of worms that you can name for internal and external internal parasites. Now, aside from diseases and defects, defects, that was the other one, defects and diseases. Defects for when it comes to the senior category, there are a lot of defects. Every bird has defects, whether it is general disqualifications or breed-specific disqualifications. And this is why you want to have at least not the whole American Poultry Association or American Bantam Association standard of perfection, but you want to at least have a picture of your breed's description, because some breeds have disqualifications and defects that are specific only to them, and then some birds don't have any breed-specific ones, so it would just be the general ones. So, for example, my breed, Phoenix, both bantam and large fowl, don't have any breed-specific disqualifications or defects. So it would just be going along the general guidelines of APA's defects and disqualifications. So a good one for the general one, since that is what I have practiced and what I've gone for, is defects are anything that affect the appearance of the bird. So stuff that isn't right. So on a bird with a single comb, it would be if they have like extra points. You know, single combs are supposed to have 5 points. If it has 6, 7, 8 points, that's a defect. If you have a white bird and they stay in the sun too much, they get brassy. So their feathers get a yellow hue to them. That is a defect because it's not necessarily affecting their health. It's just affecting their appearance. If your bird is registered in the wrong variety, that is, depending on if you're doing county or, okay, I take that question back. Another defect would be if they're like, let me see. If their wings like, if they've got like a broken feather on their wing, that would be a defect considering based on the level you're competing in, which I do assume I've read through the questions. A lot of you guys are just doing like county shows. So when it comes to county shows and working with youth, they're a little more loosey-goosey on the rules. So what I've seen is basically anything that is not detrimental to their health, they're going to count it as a defect. Disqualifications are going to be things like if they have a broken leg. Disqualification is going to be if they're registered in the completely wrong class. A disqualification is going to be considered if a bird has squirrel tail when they're not supposed to have squirrel tail. So squirrel tail is like when their tail pikes all the way up. And that's not proper to their breed. Any characteristic that isn't supposed to be on your chicken's breed is going to be considered a disqualification. So it's always good. Like I said, I have like a minimum of things you should know. Know three defects and know 3 disqualifications of your breed. And you'll be able to pass through showmanship with flying colors. Let me see. Okay. I think I've pretty much gone over the majority of topics that have been talked about in the contests that I have competed in. And like I said, a lot of the showmanship contests I've been competed in, they have typically the same vibe, the same type of questions, the same category. So it's not always you're going to be asked different questions every single time you compete. And I've competed in multiple states. So I've had, different judges, different show secretaries that have come up with these questions. And they mostly tend to stick, before you get into tiebreakers, they tend to stick to a whole bunch of not necessarily common knowledge, but questions that show that you have looked at the standard, that you have looked and read through your breed specific pages so that you know exactly what you're doing. And it shows that you know how to care for your bird and everything. So those are typically the questions asked for you. That is you individually. You should know the answers to name parts of your bird, name what exactly your bird is, name defects, disqualifications, diseases, vaccinations. There's internal and there's external. Those are typically, like I said, the very, very commonly asked questions, the comb types, the varieties, all that stuff. if you want to get really competitive in showmanship, then you want to know your bird really, really well. You want to be able to tell them basically everything about your bird, tell them other breeds in your class. So my Phoenix is an AOSB, all of their standard breeds. So other birds in her class are going to be Sumatras, naked necks, what do they call it? Americanas. It's always good. That is my basis. 3. Know 3 birds in your bird's class. And so that is about the general gist of you as an individual, how you want to present yourself. Now, of course, showmanship is not just about you. It is also about the bird, because a judge wants to see a very well cared for bird. So you want to make sure that before you compete in showmanship, you're grooming your bird. You want to make sure that you bathe the bird, because the judge may or may not handle your bird, and you don't want lice or mites to be jumping onto the judge. So in reality, showmanship starts from like the second you check your bird into the fair. The second you decide, like, this is the bird I'm going to use for showmanship, is when you want to start. So you want to make sure your bird is healthy, is well taken care of. You want to bathe your bird a week before your show or showmanship, to make sure that your bird is looking the best it can possibly be. Because although they don't judge you directly based on how pretty your bird is, it does look way better if you're using a well-groomed bird compared to a bird that has not been bathed, a bird that's been like just sitting in your yard for a long time without any loving care. So let me go through these questions here. Let me see. We're going to use our bird treat. Okay. So Dominique asked, what do you say if your bird does not have something wrong with it? What do you say? So if your bird doesn't have something wrong with it, then you'll just go, although my bird does not have any defects or disqualifications on it, some of the breed defects and disqualifications are, point them out where they would be. So say I'm showing this bird and she's got quite a few defects on it just because of her age. So she's gotten older. She's not out of show anymore, but she doesn't have any side spurt on her comb. So I would say a defect would be if she had not side spurt. A defect would be if she had an extra point on her comb. And I would point, this is her comb. This is where the extra point would be. You could count like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She's got all of them. A disqualification would be if she has a side sprig on her comb, and you could show like a side sprig would be pointed out here. Or you could say, since if your bird is clean-legged versus feather-legged, and obviously if you have a clean-legged bird and your bird doesn't have any disqualifications, then you could say my bird would be disqualified if it had stubs on its shanks, because it's supposed to be a clean-legged bird. Sorry, she's a little sassy. She's too old for this now. But you would just want to say the general, questions about like, oh, this would be what my breed would have wrong with it if they were to have something. So even if you don't have like a direct answer for the bird that you are using, then you want to show that know about the breed, know about if they were to have it, then this would be some of the things. So one of the, I have the Google form pulled up right now with all the questions. And so I'm going to go through it. So
you have another question up earlier in there.
Let me
okay. Is it better to have the information of your bird in the APA word for word?
No, not word for word. I could not tell you the information about my bird word for word, because that's like, if you want to get really, really competitive and go word for word, go ahead. Typically, I don't think your showmanship judges would be able to tell you if what you just said was word for word. You want to be able to say it in the most accurate way possible, where you're giving correct information. If you need to change up, the order of the words, the way you say it, then go ahead and do that. Word for word, not necessarily. If you need to use, synonyms or something like that, go ahead. But don't be looking into your standard and like memorizing that exact sentence, because you want to make sure that you also understand what exactly you're telling the judge. You don't want to just sound like you're going monotone, on an automatic. You want to make sure you have the idea, exactly what it's saying, but, in the way that you can understand it, that if somebody was to ask you to explain the sentence you just said, you'd be able to explain it. But make sure you do read up your APA standard. Let me see. Okay. Should I share history of my bird with the judge? Okay. I have learned about the history of my bird before, but never in my introduction. I was asked, actually, at the 2024 Ohio National Competition for Showmanship, I was asked to share as much as I possibly knew about my bird. Like, it was a free-for-all to show just what you knew about your bird. So that in that instance, I shared history of my bird, where they originated, where they're from, the year that they were accepted into the standard, information like that. Typically, at your youth county fairs, you're not going to be asked that. You're just going to be asked to know, like I said, type, class, breed. I know. Breed, variety, and the gender. Because history of the bird will go forever. If you know your bird really well, then you will just share and share and share. And typically, judges will ask that when they're tie breaking, because they want to see who really, really knows their bird. So unless you're asked to share the history of your bird, or are told, like, tell me everything you know about your bird, then you can go ahead and start spewing all the history facts you know. If not, then I would just stick with the type, breed, variety, class, gender, to keep it short and sweet, because you also don't want to come off to the judge as a show off. I feel like stuff that really makes you stick out is being, you want to be sweet. You're not over here with a competitive attitude, because I have showed lambs and goats and poultry and rabbits, and the showmanship in between those animals, between large animals and small animals, is very different. For small animals, you're competitive, but you want to be like on the sweeter side because you're handling a smaller animal. You need to look compassionate, not aggressive. You don't want to be like, you don't want to come off too strong to the judge,